Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure what time you're watching this video, but let's talk about anxiety. Okay, so we have anxiety disorders that we're going to discuss. Bear with me as I get through these. Hopefully, we will be able to make this an exciting and informative video. When I speak, I don't really like to speak at people, but really don't have a choice considering we are in this COVID era. But nevertheless, I will try to make it as interesting as possible as I continue to learn a little bit more about how to engage with you all on social media. All right, so we're going to talk about anxiety disorders. It includes disorders that share features of excessive fear and anxiety and related behavioral disturbances. Fear, definition: fear is the emotional response to real or perceived imminent threat. Okay? Perceived imminent threat or real. Anxiety is the anticipation of a future threat. So the threat has yet to happen. That this is simply what you're anticipating. It's in your mind. Okay. Panic attacks are not limited to anxiety disorders, but rather can be seen in other mental disorders as well. Another tidbit is anxiety disorders different from developmental normative fear and anxiety by being excessive or persisting beyond developmentally appropriate periods. Since individuals with anxiety disorders typically overestimate the danger in situations, they fear or avoid the primary determination of whether the fear or anxiety is excessive or out of proportion is made by the clinician. Okay? Taking cultural, contextual matters into account. Many of the anxiety disorders develop in childhood and tend to persist if not treated. I want to pause there because you will hear the word disorder a lot in my videos, but I want to let you know not to be alarmed. Okay, do not be alarmed. So disorder, can you see? Disorder. If you break the word down, can I do that? Prefix is dis, which means lack of or not. Order means sequence, structure, arrangement, all of those other synonyms. Okay. So it means you do not have order, sequence, or structure in your thinking and your processing. So it's for lack of a better term, it's out of whack. Okay. That's all that disorder means. It means that you are not, and I hate to use this word, I really dislike this word, normal. Now my question is, what is normal? Who is the constant? Who are we comparing people to? Okay, you have the bell-shaped curve, and typically in the clinical settings, you have a group of people, you test them. Those who fall in the middle are considered normal. Those who are on the outliers on the side, those are individuals that are extreme left or extreme right. And a lot of those individuals will be labeled as mentally ill or lunatics or crazy, or all of those terms in similar words. They are not within the middle. But don't be afraid, because a lot of individuals who were deemed geniuses were on the outliers. They were not like everyone else. So just a bit of encouragement: if you are on the outskirts of the bell-shaped curve, then do not panic. Do not panic. That's just how clinicians are able to group and separate and label individuals. That's a whole nother video. We have 9 different disorders, really 7. The last 2 are substance/medication induced anxiety disorders, and the last one is other specified anxiety disorders. Selective mutism, which is a part of the anxiety disorders. And I read that selective mutism is characterized by a consistent failure to speak in social situations in which there is an occupational setting or otherwise interferes with normal social communication. Okay, so the old DSM grouped OCD and PTSD together. The new placed them in different categories. The new DSM placed them in different categories because they are truly extensive. They are, there are different subsections within those 2 disorders alone. Okay. Mind you, disorder means not sequenced, not arranged, or a lack of arrangement, a lack of sequence, or a lack of structure. So I will cover the aforementioned topics in another video, OCD and PTSD. So under anxiety disorder are separation anxiety disorder, selective mutism, specific phobia, social anxiety disorder or social phobias, panic disorder, agoraphobia, generalized anxiety disorder, and the last 2 that I mentioned earlier, which were substance/medication induced anxiety disorder and other specified anxiety disorder. So let's get to it. Anxiety. For this, there are 4 criterion that are listed under this particular disorder. The first criterion is developmentally inappropriate and excessive fear or anxiety concerning separation from those to whom the individual is attached. There we go. That makes more sense. As evidenced by at least 3 of the following. And a list of 8 recurrent behaviors, persistent and excessive behaviors. For example, repeated nightmares involving the theme of separation, persistent reluctance or refusal to go out, away from home, to school, to work, or elsewhere because of fear of separation, and repeated complaints of physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches, nausea, vomiting when separated from the individual that they have the attachment to. In order to be diagnosed with separation anxiety, the fear, anxiety, or avoidance has to be persistent and lasting at least 4 weeks in children and adolescents. And in adults, it lasts typically for 6 months or longer. Okay, and children's separation is typically comorbid. And comorbid, co means with, together, or joint. Morbid is a Latin word, and it comes from morbus, which means it's indicative of a disease. So when I thought of morbid, I thought of death. It is a Latin word, and it means it's indicative of a disease. So two diseases joined together with simultaneously occurring. So it's more than one disease or disease in a person at the same time. So typically with generalized anxiety disorder and specific phobia. In adults, common comorbidities include specific phobia, PTSD, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and personality disorder. Depressive and bipolar disorders are also comorbid with separation anxiety in adults. Okay, there are differences when it comes to children and adults. Next is selective mutism. There are 5 criterion and at least lasting for 1 month. Not limited the first month of school. This is within children, pertaining to children. I want to read this one criterion to alleviate confusion. So there has to be a failure to speak, not attributing to the lack of knowledge or comfort with the spoken language. So if the individual do not know the language, you can't deem them with selective mutism. They simply do not know. They simply do not have the wherewithal or the word or the verbiage to even communicate. So that will not fall under selective mutism. Children with selective mutism often refuse to speak at school, which leads to academic and educational impairments because teachers find it difficult to assess their skills, i.e. reading. If a child has selective mutism, then it's hard for the teacher to be able to pinpoint their reading level, their reading skills, etc. Working in the mental health field, I had an individual who suffered from selective mutism. I worked at a children's hospital, and she didn't speak for a while, and she would only speak to a certain few individuals. And anytime that she was separated from her parentals, mainly her mom, she would not speak. It was too much for her. She was anxious. The anxiety was just overwhelming. And I would say that she had generalized anxiety disorder as well. And it says that that's typically selective mutism is comorbid in children.